Is everyone ready? Good morning. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, and along with my great co-counsel located here in the state of Michigan, as I have said previously, a true champion of justice. We've fought civil rights cases in the state of Michigan before, and I'm just very honored to work with him and his great team of lawyers, as well as Attorney Robin McCoy and Attorney Greg Smith. We have the pleasure of representing the family of Patrick Lyoya. And obviously, the crux of the matter, while we're here today, is to hear from Dr. Spitz, who Attorney Johnson is going to talk with you in length about just how very capable and renowned that he is. But I first want to start off this press conference with you, and Ayanna Hatchett, our co-counsel, also present here with us. And I want to thank Sarah Lucrecio for helping us put all this together. But we want to start off with updates. We told the Lyoya family that we would be intentional and very intense in investigating every aspect of how this Grand Rapids police officer escalated a simple misdemeanor traffic stop into a deadly execution with him shooting an unarmed civilian in the back of his head. The autopsy findings from the independent autopsy performed by Dr. Spitz is going to get into very graphic details about just how horrific his killing was in a scientific manner. And we will have scientific evidence of not only the entry and the trajectory, but how the bullet traveled, where it ended up, which I think are very important to Attorney Johnson and I as we try to make good on our word to the family that we're going to investigate every aspect of this case and get to the truth. So in doing that, we believe it's important that you take everything in context. When you look at the video that was released by the Grand Rapids Police Department, and you don't have to take Ben Johnson's word for it, you don't have to take Ben Crump's word for it. Look at it with your own eyes. You would notice that the police officer initially is not traveling in the same direction of Patrick. So what we see is him make a U-turn to get behind Patrick. As my investigator Cliff Jones and I were reviewing the video over and over again, we both acknowledge that we have to investigate whether this is a classic DWB case, a driving while black case, that he profiled this black motorist and turned his car around, because when he turns the car around, what you see is Patrick's car is about a block and a half away from him. and then all of a sudden, you see the lights on, and you have to ask yourself, how did he know that Patrick tag registration wasn't valid when he's coming from the opposite direction? These are things that Attorney Johnson and I want to investigate intensely, because it goes to the mentality of that police officer, and it goes to the culture that was manifest in that police department, at least as it pertained to this particular officer in these instances. The second thing we certainly want to look at is the aspects, and Attorney Johnson is going to talk about this, of his body camera video. We want to investigate that thoroughly as well. And obviously, it is really going to be about use of force that we're going to talk about for the brunt of our time today with the autopsy and how Dr. Spitz arrived at his preliminary conclusions. And then certainly we will look at the aspects of how unnecessary this was when you look at the video and you hear the results of the autopsy. Just another senseless killing of an unarmed black person in America by the very individual who was supposed to protect him. And so we won't belabor the point. We're going to get to the autopsy findings after my great co-counsel talks to you about those things we promised to the Lyoya family about investigating intensely every aspect. And he's going to introduce an incredible doctor who is very thorough in doing this independent autopsy. So I give you to a person you all know very well here in Detroit, Attorney Ben Johnson.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, everybody. It saddens me that we're here today in the very room where just a few years ago, pre-COVID, my firm and I celebrated with many folks in the legal community Detroit for our holiday party. And when I think about that night and think about coming in here today and what it is we're having to talk about, it tell you the truth, makes me sick to my stomach.
Thank you.
But we appreciate you being here, and I want to explain about the review process that Ben Crump just told you about. We don't have all the video. You know that. We have what you all have. So obviously, doing this type of work for Ben and I for over 30-some years each, you review it, we see more and more each time. Mr. Crump, as his co-counsels, charged me with reviewing and hiring experts. And we're very fortunate because, as many of you in the room know, I've done this type of work for a long time, and I think we have access to and we know some of the foremost experts in a number of different areas. One of the experts, who I'm not going to name yet, but we've retained him, he's a police policies and procedure expert who testifies, who teaches police policies and procedures to the police all across the United States. And he also serves as an expert, sometimes on behalf of plaintiff, sometimes on behalf of defense. And we've already retained him, and he has certainly shared with us his initial opinions. The two that I'm going to mention very briefly before I introduce, again, someone that doesn't need to be introduced to this room, Dr. Werner Spitz, one of the foremost forensic pathologists in the world, is the body cam that many of you keep asking Ben and I about, and I want to respond directly. Folks, we haven't seen the body cam yet, but we're gonna. In a civil case, when we get up and filing, we will ask for the body cam. Mr. Crump and I are in the process of sending a letter, we call it a spoliation letter, to the city of Grand Rapids. They know it's coming. keep all the evidence. And they will. And the Michigan State Police will as well, because they're going to look at the body cam. People asked us every day, right, Ben? They say, hey, tell us how the body cam could turn off in a struggle. And the answer is, again, knowing straight up, I haven't seen it yet. And part of my job, Mr. Crump's job, will be look at the body cam and actually touch it ourselves, okay? But I'm going to refer you all back, because a number of you were in the room with the chief of police on that Friday. Lauren, I see you, Rob, because I saw you right on film. And he admitted something to you that I hope you all got. In order to turn this body cam off, the button needs to be depressed for 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Tell me how, in a struggle, while he's on top of our client is face down on the ground, that body cam can be depressed right on that one spot for 3 seconds. And we also know later on it gets turned back on. So I know what that suggests to me. You all are smart people. You can figure it out on your own. But again, that's one of the things we'll be looking at. Can I prove it with 100% certainty? The answer is no. But it's certainly important information that we now know since we've reviewed this material over and over again. Next, Mr. Crump has told me, in this case, in every civil case, ladies and gentlemen, this is called a wrongful death, police misconduct, excessive force, civil rights, call it whatever you want. It goes by all those names and more. But in every single civil case like this, the burden of proof is on these two. And Ms. Hatchett and Maddie Sinkovich is in the back of the room. I want to thank them for being here, and their entire team, Liza Dodson and Maria Reyna, Danielle Asplin, thank you, Chris Desmond. So we have the burden of proof. So folks say, well, then, haven't they done an autopsy? Answer, yes. The Kent County Medical Examiner has done an autopsy. And I'm here to tell you something that I think you know, I hope you know. They knew Patrick died that day the second they saw his body of a gunshot wound to the head. But it's not just the examination that Dr. Spitz will share with you about. They obviously also do a toxicology study where they run studies on the blood because they want to see whether there's alcohol, drugs, etc. in the system. Dr. Spitz did not do a toxicology exam because by the time, obviously, he was given access to Patrick's body, those days were long over, and I won't get more graphic than that. We don't have that report yet. We're in the process of asking for that report, and we'll see whether we get it or whether we get the excuse that they're only going to give it to the Michigan State Police. We'll update you about that later. But so why an independent autopsy? And the answer is we don't know for sure, other than we know Patrick died of a gunshot wound to the head. We know that that's going to be the conclusion of the Kent County Medical Examiner. But as you all may know, Patrick and his family have a funeral on Friday. So our opportunity to have our expert of our choosing to do an autopsy obviously closes pretty quickly. So when Ben Crump asked me, then, I don't want you just to hire one of the best forensic pathologists in the country. I want you hiring two. So I did. Didn't have to look very far. Dr. Werner Spitz is by far, I believe, the most foremost renowned forensic pathologist in our country. And by the way, believe it or not, guys, our world. And you'll hear that from other experts. We also hired Dr. Michael Baden, B as in boy, A-D-E-N. Many of you know Dr. Baden's name as well. Much like Dr. Spitz, Dr. Baden has been all over in the biggest cases that I'll share with you a couple about from Dr. Spitz. Dr. Michael Baden is from New York, and Dr. Baden agreed with me and Ben that when Dr. Spitz said he was available to do the independent autopsy, no reason for Dr. Baden to come to Michigan to do the same thing that Dr. Werner Spitz, who's probably done more autopsies than Dr. Baden, but again, Dr. Baden's done a lot too. So we've had 2 of those folks already involved in this case, because it is our burden of proof to prove to a civil jury what killed Patrick. So a lot of folks don't get that in the background. They wonder why we do this. That's why. Dr. Spitz, as those of you that are from our area know, he has been doing this type of work for longer than actually I've been alive. And I've had the pleasure of using Dr. Spitz as an expert in these types of cases and others. I've had the displeasure of having him be the expert on the other side. So obviously, I want him on my team. Dr. Spitz was, as many of you know, was involved in the investigations of President Kennedy, of Martin Luther King, and jumping forward into more of the recent past in the O.J. Simpson criminal case, Casey Anthony criminal case, Michael Jackson, I believe, criminal and civil case, I believe, and many, many, many more. Dr. Spitz is board certified in not just forensic pathology, you all know, I hope. Forensic pathology is the study of exactly how someone dies, if you will, but especially by trauma. He's also board certified in other areas that will become more important as part of the civil case. So when we called up Dr. Spitz last week, we retained him, and thanks to Diana Lucky, his assistant, he went to Grand Rapids and did an independent autopsy at the Gillespie Funeral Home in Grand Rapids. And again, that's standard protocol for a situation like this. Dr. Spitz then did a preliminary investigation. He shared his initial thoughts with us, and even before it started, Ben Crump said, we need to share so that everybody knows, because you all are calling, and more power to you. We appreciate, obviously, you want to know the science, and we brought you the scientists to talk about that. So Dr. Spitz has some drawings. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Crump. He brought a model to show you the significant part of his findings and why. And before we talk about that, you all know, because you've covered criminal cases like this, civil cases like this is said and done with the utmost respect for Patrick and his family. God forbid that any one of us in this room ever would have to listen to someone describe what Dr. Spitz has to. So I just wanted to give a shout out, obviously, to our clients, and I turn it, thank you, Mr. Crump, back to Ben.
No, thank you very much, Attorney Johnson. Before we have Dr. Spitz go into the details of his autopsy, we would put it in context. We want to show the video, if we could, Sarah.
On the table, Ben.
Okay, thank you. And Ben, I think.
Yes, sir.
Can you turn up the volume and play the video for us, Laura? Oh, we don't have audio, okay. So, if we just play the video, starting from the beginning.
Obviously, the video taken by the passenger.
Of the cell phone.
So,
What we think is so very significant is at the point when he takes out his gun, look where his head is at when he shot him. And this is going to line up with Dr. Spitz autopsy findings. Then I believe he has his hand on Patrick's head. Patrick is looking away from him, head practically on the ground, and he then takes his gun and puts it on his head with, as you will hear from our his hand turning to the right, I'm sorry, to the left with the right hand, and he shoots into his head, and the trajectory goes from the back to the right part of the brain. And we only wanted to show you the video. Hey, we don't have sound for you. Apologies, but you all have great technology. Go back and look at it as we looked at it frame by frame. control of him. And as Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson and I were talking, common sense would tell you if you didn't have control, you would not remove your dominant hand. He feels in such control that he removes his dominant hand to take his gun out with ease, seems like, and then to put it in the back of Patrick's head. And so we're going to let Dr. Spitz go, and then at some point he's going to come to the podium and show you the model of the skull and the trajectory so that you can see very clearly what happened. And at this time, we turn it over to Dr. Spitz.
You want to do this doc right now? Okay.
Yep.
You have the report, oh, okay. And you have the probe?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. What I have here is is a skull, a human skull, not fake. No, this is from a dead body. And what I did is I made a hole where the bullet wound of entrance was situated in the back of the head. Yeah. And I will show you, okay. The skull was opened originally to take the brain out and examine it, and it is hollow inside, but in order to remove the brain, an electric saw was used, and the top of the skull was lifted away, and the brain was approached. It is now placed back so that the skull is whole, and yeah, well, let's put it back. In order to visualize this, I made a hole in the back with a drill. I made a hole in the back of the head and put a probe into the hole and guided the probe from the back here, where you can see the probe going into the back of the head and out in the right side, up a little higher than the entrance wound. And at that point, there is another hole that I made because the bullet went through the bone and lodged under the skin. And it lodged under the skin for the simple reason that the skin is elastic, stretched, lost its the velocity of the bullet, because the bullet stretched the skin in the temple area, in the upper temple area, and at that moment the bullet stopped, and it was located in that location. So there was no complete exit. There was only an exit from the skull, but not an exit from the head. And that was, that bullet was in a shape that, well, when I did the autopsy, the findings were, as I stated, the bullet had been removed, but the small fragment of bone from the area were available and showed me what actually had happened. And if you have any questions, please ask me.
Do you want to read from your report?
I will do some more testing and some more inquiry into what is known already. And I like to do that because these observations at the scene, which I obviously did not attend, but those who did will provide the information.
I want everybody to know the probe that Dr. Spitz is using to show this is standard protocol in these types of cases to show the trajectory or the path of the bullet/missile.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
It's not something that's being done to dramatize anything. That is actually how to do it. Dr. Spitz, will you tell the folk what is it that you believe that actually killed Patrick?
There's no question what killed this young man. The young man, by the way, was only 26 years old. He weighed an estimated 150 pounds. He was...
You say 5'9" as well. 5'9".
No, he was not. Yeah, he was about 5'9", 5'8" to 5'9", but probably 5'9". Okay. And the bullet entered in the back of the head, below. Let me show you on myself.
Okay.
Can you see it? Can you see my finger pointing to where the entrance wound was located? And it exited from the skull, not from the head, from the skull, right there.
And they want you to turn around one more time.
And it lodged under the skin. Why under the skin? Because the skin is elastic. See, I put my skin away from the skull. That is where the bullet was located. And why it was located there? Because it had, by now, when it reached up here, it slid along the interior surface of the bone. You see, the skull is sort of like a ball, like round in this location. So when the bullet traveled along, this is all in milliseconds, traveled from the back of the head to this location along the inner surface of the bone until it hit this area of the bone. It broke it and lodged partially inside the head and partially under the skin.
Thank you. And Dr. Spitz, at some point, we will read from your report, but ladies and gentlemen, while this is very important that Attorney Johnson and I revealed the findings of this independent autopsy, you may recall during the press conference with the police, it was asked, was he shot in the back of the head? And I think the chief said, all I can say is he was shot in the head. He can't tell you whether he was shot in the back of the head. Well, today, based on scientific evidence, we can confirm that Patrick Lyoya was shot in the back of his head. That is now scientific evidence of this tragic killing and what his family believes was an execution. And that's why we're so grateful to Dr. Spitz and Dr. Biden for agreeing, as Attorney Johnson said, to do this. what I will do before I turn it back over to Dr. Spitz, I want to just read, I think it's important, Attorney Johnson, to read what he finds as evidence of injury. He says, when the body is turned over, face down, there's evidence of an entrance bullet wound located slightly left of midline of the back of the head, 4 inches below the top of the scalp. The wound track running from this bullet wound runs upward and to the right to a point in the right temporal partial area, where the bone was fragmented, but the overlying skin was intact. He puts in parentheses, we believe at that location a missile was removed at first autopsy from between the skin and the fragmented bone. Bone fragments surrounding the bullet wound of entrance range in size, and some appear to have been cut with a saw. A bone fragment around the entrance wound was retained for microscopic examination, as was the wound in the skin. Extensive hemorrhages is noted in the glia and over the periphery of the brain in this location. The upper cervical spinal cord appears to have been disconnected. And so that was evidence of injury. And I think Attorney Johnson, I just do the opinion, and then we may want to blow up the anatomical models and let Dr. Spitz opine. But the opinion is this 26-year-old African-American male, Patrick Lyoya, died as a result of a single gunshot wound with entrance wound in the back of the head. The deceased was conscious and aware of the fact that a gun was being held to the back of his head. Death was instantaneous when the gun was fired. It appears that a missile was recovered during a first autopsy. No soot or gunpowder particles were recognized by the naked eye examination in or about the bullet wound of entrance in the soft tissues or on the bony edges of the wound. The fragmentation of the skull at the site of the entrance wound suggests a contact shot. Blood drained from the lungs in the left chest cavity was collected for chemical analysis. Signed, Dr. Warner U. Spitz. And so, if you want to show him his anatomical models on the screen,
Okay.
then.
Alex, Irving, can you help us? We're going to have Dr. Spitz hold the model for the screen to go up. Is that possible or not?
Sure.
Down there?
He's already up?
Oh,
Okay.
good enough. Got it. You want to sit, Doctor? You good?
I want to make one more comment.
Please.
Please.
When the brain, in general, when the brain is injured in any way, by fire, by blood loss, by bullet wound, by whatever it is that injured the brain in its entirety will swell. And that is very fast, that it goes through the entire brain, this manifestation of swelling. And when that occurs, the functions of the brain gradually will cease. And within seconds, the entire brain will swell and death will follow.
Thank you. Why don't we set up the model over here?
have it on the TV
I like-
monitor.
they
You want
got
the
these
boards?
boards,
You want the
yeah.
blower?
Yeah.
See the blower, Danielle? Thank you.
Why don't we bring it over here, so it's got more room for Dr. Spitz to... This seems to have more room for him. If we set the easel up here.
Easel's on the way. Okay.
Dr. Spitz,
Yes, sir.
would you come and explain your anatomical model to the ladies and gentlemen of the press? There, you got that. Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Watch those cords, Doc.
And I'm gonna pull it over a little more because they want to hear you on the microphone. And so, okay, no problem. Is that good with you all? I don't think it'll reach that.
How about this way?
Okay. Yeah, try that.
Doc?
May I use this one first?
Absolutely.
I started the autopsy in the funeral home in Grand Rapids, Gillespie Funeral Home. I started the autopsy with the body on a gurney, and he was face up. And because he was face up, I undid the stitches that had been made with a cut from the left shoulder down to the middle of the chest plate and then up again to the other shoulder. These were stitched, these cuts were stitched, and I undid them in order to gain access to the interior of the body, and then I extended my opening of the body by undoing another stitch that went from the bottom of the V that was right here in the middle of the chest plate down to the pelvis, and opened up the body completely. And inside the body was a plastic bag with all the organs. So then I was given in the funeral home another bag, and I transferred the individual organs that had been removed at a first autopsy from the bag in the body. I removed those organs and examined them and put them in the other bag that I was supplied. And that took maybe an hour to remove each organ and examine the chest walls and the abdominal walls, and convinced myself that there were no rib fractures, there were no injuries inside the body, except as follows. What did I do next? After I finished examining the organs, I turned, with help, I turned the body over.
Can I stop you?
Yes?
You've done thousands of autopsies. If a person were engaged in an ongoing, highly physical assault with another person,
Yes.
would you expect to see bruising, rib fractures, cuts on the hands and face,
Yes,
potentially knees?
absolutely.
Did you see any of that here?
No, no.
What's the significance?
The only injury on this body, the only injury on this body was a typical bullet wound of entrance. There's no doubt. You may remember when President Kennedy was shot. He was shot in one of the shots was in the shoulder, in the back of the right shoulder, and the bullet came to the neck because he was hunched over, and it exited from the neck. It did not enter in the neck. But the pathologist who did the autopsy was a hospital pathologist, and he was not a forensic pathologist. So he did not really understand that there is such a thing as a typical entrance bullet wound, which President Kennedy had in the back of the shoulder. This gentleman here, in this case, in Grand Rapids, had a bullet wound of entrance that was absolutely typical. There was no question, and there is no question, and there never will be question, that this was a typical entrance bullet wound with a rim of abrasion, of scraping all the way around when that bullet, when the bullet pushed the skin out and the lead on the bullet, or the dirt on the bullet, or the oily substance on the bullet, whatever it is black, and it scraped the outside of the bullet wound of entrance. And
Did you talk about the path?
the path of the bullet is from I hope you can see the path of the bullet. The entrance of the bullet is right there. Right there.
What's midline? You said midline. What's that?
Well, the midline is this midline. The middle of the body, this goes from the top of the head all the way down the midline of the body. Do you mind if I show it on you? No. Okay. Yeah. The body is now turned over on the gurney. This is the body. This is the midline, all the way down the body. And we are dealing with this area here. And this area here, right there, is a bullet wound of entrance. A typical bullet wound of entrance. And it went like this. And here, in this location where the temple is, was a damaged bone. And the bone was fractured into small pieces. And partially out of the bone, out of the skull, under the skin. The skin had never been opened in this area. It didn't need to be opened because the whole scalp was taken down, and the minute they reached this area above the ear, above the ear, a bullet was found.
So Dr. Spitz,
Thank you.
the bullet enters the back of the head, goes through the skull, the bone in the back that you showed, right?
Went to the right. Went to the right.
Microphone down.
Went to the right, and through the bone, broke the bone, through the bone, not completely, because part of the bullet was still inside the scalp. And part of the bullet went through the skull and pushed the skin out.
In between,
Here.
inside the skull, obviously, is the brain.
Between the skull and the skin was the bullet.
The brain.
a partial bullet.
But in terms of inside, that it also, not only did it go through both bones, but it obviously went through the brain.
It went, of course, it went through, partially through and partially above the brain.
What's the significance of it going up and to the right?
Well, his head was turned somewhat.
You saw in the video.
Yes, his head was.
Is that consistent with what we saw?
Is it consistent with his head turned to the left
Yeah.
on the ground?
Exactly. Exactly. This, by the way, I said it before and I'll say it again. There was no other injury from the top of the head to the big toe of the feet. No other injury besides this. And it caused the brain to swell. It caused, you see, we could not see that the brain swelled at this point when I did the autopsy. Why not? Because he was kept on life support for a whole week, for about 8 days. So at that moment, the swelling subsided. But he was already dead. He was dead when he was shot.
Dr. Spitz, before Attorney Johnson calls on the press to ask questions, based on autopsy, scientific proof that it was to the back of the head.
Oh, there's no question. No question at all. I don't know how else to tell you. This bullet wound here was an absolute entrance bullet wound.
We're going to switch.
There was no question. The instant I saw it, because he had very short hair in the back. Well, it wasn't so short because it was it was, what do you call that?
Your report says it was dreads.
Yeah, it was put in a nice fashion, and it was woven together, and which made this area devoid of hair. The hair was cut there, and I saw the bullet wound without even having to cut any hair or nothing like that. And the bone was broken, so the piece of bone with the bullet wound in it was available to be seen right there when the body was turned over.
Before we go to the next board, Jim Gershman.
Dr. Spitz, I think a lot of us are wondering,
Can you come closer?
And we'll take questions from all of you if you have.
I think a lot of us are wondering, was this a sudden death or close to a sudden death?
Every death is sudden. There is a second when the death occurs and the whole body begins to deteriorate. But to call it a sudden death is misleading. Yes, it was in a way, time-wise, it was sudden, but it was not a sudden death in that sense of the word. Sudden death in my language, in the language of a forensic pathologist, is a natural death. This is not a natural death. It's a death by bullet wound.
When would his life functions have stopped?
Sorry?
How quickly would his life functions have stopped?
Seconds.
So we can come to the late,
Less than seconds.
less than seconds.
Yeah, well, he would die in seconds. But he knew, he was fully aware at one point or over a period, depending on what transpired before, that there's a gun being held to his head. First of all, the gun is cold. Second, the gun is metal. And the gun, that's why I said I thought that the gun was pushed against the skin, which gives a certain feeling to the person that is being detained, that there's a gun involved, and push it on the head, and who knows what's going to follow.
Thank
Okay. What kind of bullet it was? I don't know what kind of bullet it was, other than to tell you that it was a large caliber bullet. What is a large caliber bullet? A 38 is a large caliber bullet. I don't think it was a 44 or a 45, but it was a powerful bullet. It was I think it was something that gives a bullet wound in the bone that is either that of a 38 caliber or a 9 millimeter. They all give the same kind of bullet wound.
My recollection, to answer your question directly, Grand Rapids often, most of them had Glocks. There could be a 6 or 9 millimeter, but probably a Glock. And understand the bullet wasn't there.
Well, a Glock is a manufacturer.
Right. But the bullet wasn't there because, of course, of the previous autopsy.
Right.
What doctor was explaining, you could still see the damage that the bullet obviously caused. What was your other question?
The other question
Tox.
was that the toxicology report explained why
The toxicology report will only be considered when the results of toxicological analysis will be performed. And at this time, I did not have the chance to, but there was a holiday in the middle, there was Easter, so I'm not even aware if at this time the blood that I retrieved from the bullet, from the body has not, I don't know if it has or has not been sent to the laboratory. The laboratory is probably the best, if not one of the best, laboratories in the country.
I can tell you with certainty that the medical examiner for the King County did a toxicology report. They wanted to know if Patrick had anything in his system.
Yeah, they,
You would know that. You would know that right away.
Body fluids without going dry up over the course of time. So by the time
yeah,
Spitz got there, there was very little body fluids for him to actually test.
but I have blood. I have blood, and when I came back to the office, to my office in St. Clair Shores, I froze the sample, the blood sample, and I've got 2 or 3 test tubes with blood, and we will send it to the laboratory. The laboratory is in Pennsylvania, and we'll send it as soon as I'm back this afternoon to the office.
Sir?
Dr. Spitz, did you say you were able to make a determination on whether or not the gun was pressed to the back of Patrick's head?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Did you make a determination whether the gun was actually pressed to the back of Patrick's
I
head?
think it was. You know why? Because the bone in the back of the head was not broken, it was fragmented. And why is it fragmented? Because when the gun is held in contact with the skin and pushed against the skin, the gunpowder, the bullet, the gunpowder, the soot, the gases all enter into the interior of the skull. And when that happens, the close examination, which I have as yet to do, will show black soot, because as I'm sure you know, that when a gun is, if you don't know, you go to the movies, you see it more times than you care to. So there's the gun is held against the skin. All of these substances that I mentioned to you go inside, and pressure develops in the inside, and it breaks the bone into fragments.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, considering this is an independent autopsy, can you take us through, or was it easily accessible to get the body? Did you have
We were able to ascertain the body from the Kent County Medical Examiner, have it at the funeral home, picked it up, and then when it was at the funeral home, then Dr. Spitz was allowed to go to the funeral home and conduct his autopsy.
Yeah, 2 people from the funeral home were there helping me.
This is, and again, so you folks understand, this is not only a normal course relative to lawsuits, but those of us that have loved ones, if ever anybody wanted it, one of the things a funeral home will ask you, do you want an independent autopsy to see what your loved one died from? And that's exactly how it happens. So it goes from, obviously, from the morgue and then to the funeral home. Mr. Crump took care of all that, and Dr. Spitz and Ms. Lucky were kind enough to go over on Saturday afternoon and conduct that. Autopsy by Dr. Spitz was done this past Saturday. So forgive me, I don't have the date. Doc, approximately how long did the entire autopsy take, approximately?
The autopsy took about, we left Detroit, we left St. Clair Shores, I should say, at 12 or 12:15, noon. It took us 2.5 hours to get there, maybe a little bit less. And I have a driver with a lead foot. And we got there at just before 3 o'clock and started almost immediately with the preliminaries, taking everything out from the baggage that we had where the equipment is located. And we finished after about 2 hours, maybe an hour and 3/4.
Jim?
You see, an autopsy had already been done, so I didn't need to do, didn't need to do this, cut the skin and be careful not to damage anything. So I would say about an hour and 3/4, 2 hours is what it took to do the autopsy.
Jim?
Mr. Crump, Mr. Johnson, does this mean a civil suit is inevitable? And if so, what's the timing of it?
Mr. Crump?
I think a lot of that depends on the city of Grand Rapids. I understand they say they want to do right by the family. What does that mean? We will find out. But if not, Attorney Johnson and our team of lawyers will explore every possible legal remedy to give the family justice.
Just a couple of follow-ups. In that same vein, you had said earlier that this officer should be fired, should be charged.
The family asked for him to be fired based on what they saw in the video.
My question is, what's an appropriate criminal charge, sir?
You know, obviously we have our opinions, but that would be left up to the prosecutor in Kent County, or if the state, for some reason, like they did in Minneapolis, in the state of Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery, Minneapolis with George Floyd, takes over the investigation, then the Attorney General will be in charge of it, or the federal government, the Department of Justice. But, you know, the family, obviously, you look at your loved one get killed like this, you scream bloody murder. Other social engineers and people in the legal profession would say manslaughter. So it runs the full gamut that the prosecutor would have at his discretion.
True.
Based on the evidence.
But you call this a deadly execution, so is that a murder?
Well, I call it a deadly execution because I believe that it was so unnecessary. I continue to say that this was an unnecessary killing of an unarmed black man who was shot in the back of the head. And you would be disingenuous if you were condemning people being shot in the back of the head unarmed into Ukraine by Russian soldiers, but then when you see police officers shoot unarmed black people in the back of the head, you don't condemn those types of executions.
So you have not drawn a conclusion if this is manslaughter, if it's murder?
No, I have not. You know, we have our opinions.
That is what?
Well, our opinions is that we want to see all the evidence, and we promise you, we will give you our conclusion. But the family is saying it's murder. I am telling the family we want to collect all the evidence, and then the prosecutor will determine if it's a murder charge or a manslaughter charge or any charge.
Just a couple more quick questions. There was a passenger in the car. Who's that person who shot himself on the road? Why have we not heard?
I think that he has not chosen to come forward yet for reasons that are a bit known to him and his family. Again, it's a person who has chosen not to come forward based on reasons only known to him and his family. At this time, our team has spoken to him. I have not spoken to him personally.
But you can't reveal if it's a family member or...
No, not at this time.
Mr. Crump, in the press release, you guys actually named the police officer.
I did not name the police officer. We're waiting for it to be released.
But I'm saying in the press release, his name was in the press release that was sent to the media yesterday. My question is, how did you guys get the police officer name from that?
Mr. Crump?
His name is not known for certain to me, so I have not released his name, and I normally let the police department release it, and when they want to release it, they'll tell you who it is.
Do you all know how that name got in the press release?
It was my fault. I did it.
Did Michigan State Police get county? How did you get the name?
I'm not going to reveal my sources, but I have confirmed what is being bantered about on the internet, and I actually spoke with someone that knows the officer and confirmed it was him. But Mr. Crump, and I respect, he's our leader, and he has asked me to not refer to the officer by name until the police come forward. But I want to make sure we all know the double standard of what we're talking about. And if that is, if our client shot this officer in the back of the head, you'd have known his name the same day. So although I heard the police chief say that they never do that, that's not true. And it is a double standard. And by the way, no one in our team, nor even the family, would want anyone to do anything to harm this officer. We want justice through the court system, and that's one of the things I love most about Mr. Crump and his movement and everybody that he chooses to work with in peaceful protest. We want nothing bad to happen to this officer independent of the court system, criminally and civilly.
You just said that you guys, I guess, decided that you all didn't want to, I guess, name the officer, but you didn't do it right now. What is the logic, I guess, or reasoning behind that? You could very well.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Crump could kick my butt.
Now, it is, Attorney Johnson is a great lawyer. He's thorough, so he's vetting and he's investigating. And inadvertently, it may have went out, but it is our practice to not reveal the name of the officer, to let the police department and the governmental entities do that.
One last, I'm going to follow up question. Just real quick, so if you could tell us, are there any red flags about this officer that we don't know? You can't name him, I get that, I respect that, but can you give us any red flags that would say this is, an officer that maybe we should know?
Let's hold off.
No comment.
Okay.
If you all have you all been in touch with the Michigan State Police? If so, can you tell us when you might expect when they would announce the possible charges or have the investigation wrapped up? Are you privy to that right now?
We are not privy to that. I don't think, Attorney Johnson.
I have not. And they have not reached out to us, of
Yeah.
course. And
The-
nor would they.
The Department of Justice reached out to say that they are going to review the matter. I think which is a matter of course in these high-profile, well-covered police killings in America. But the governor did tell the family, that she promised it would be a thorough investigation, that they will do everything in their power to give the most thorough investigation possible. And so she, as the leader of this state, told the family that. As I understand that, they just notified when all the, I guess, police department was doing their press conference, they just shared with us that they would do an investigation. The same day that the police officer department did their press conference. I was not. It was a private meeting between the family and the governor, and they intentionally kept it private. She only wanted, as I understand, to offer her heartfelt condolences to them personally. Yep, she said that they would do everything in their power to make sure it's a thorough investigation, as I understand it. Okay. I'm sorry? Well, no. What we said, and Mr. Cliff Jones and Attorney Johnson and us discussed it at length. When you look at the video when they release, the first thing you see is the police officer pulling into a driveway, turning around, and then getting behind Patrick, which indicates he's coming from an opposite direction. And you have to ask yourself, based on common sense, if he's coming from the opposite direction, how does he know that his tag registration is in violation? And so we concluded that we have to investigate thoroughly whether this is a DWB, where we know in the African American community as the classic driving while black profiling case, where you literally, as Madeline and all of us have seen before, you literally see an officer going in the opposite direction of a black motorist, look over, identify as a black motorist in the car, and then make a U-turn and get behind the motorist. And then there's some pretextual reason they develop to activate a stop. And then everything goes from there. And so we will investigate whether this is a driving while black case. You know, there was a question posed by the press, I don't know if it was you, but it said, was he shot in the back of the head? And they said, we can't say. So today, thanks to Dr. Spitz and his independent autopsy, Attorney Johnson and I can proclaim, based on scientific evidence, we know that Patrick Lyoya was shot in the back of the head based on scientific evidence. That is the news of today. Yes. No, I think Dr. Spitz, articulated it perfectly, that the only injury to his body was this shot to the back of the head. And remember, Patrick was not violent to the police. The police was violent to Patrick. Look at the video. It was the police punching him. It was the police kneeing him. Patrick not once swung at the police or did anything. He kept trying to walk away. And in America, you should not be sentenced to death from walking away from the police. But that's the reality in the black community.
The significance of that, obviously, and I've read it in every paper and talked about Patrick fighting with this officer. He wasn't fighting. What he was ultimately doing was trying to defend himself and push the officer away from him. But if you notice, you never see a fist, you never see a knife, no baseball bat, no gun, no nothing. And if this was a true fight, what you would have seen, I've seen 2-minute fight is what I've read in so many different articles, and I hope you guys change that, because it's not true. He was resisting, is the word, But he was not actively fighting this officer. Hence, you have no physical injuries to knuckles, face, body, etc. I would think that's pretty obvious, but the answer is that under this scenario, okay, this was not a deadly force scenario. And I mentioned this last week, and it's a little technical, so forgive me, but I'm going to give you the lawyer answer. What we have to prove under the law is that at the moment this officer drew his weapon, because you only draw a weapon if you're going to use it. That's how they're all trained. From the second that he pulled the weapon until he shot and killed Patrick was milliseconds, as Ben said. Never gave a verbal warning, which is required under the federal law. If it's feasible is the word, never gave a warning, halt or I'm going to shoot you, or other words that we could all imagine. I'm also going to throw in here something no one's talked about yet. No one's talked about yet how Patrick never got a warning about the use of a taser. We've all seen taser. Lauren, you're too good. Taser is not for us. Taser is other cops in the area, stand away because I'm going to tase them. What they're supposed to do by Taser International's own policies and procedures, which Grand Rapids has adopted, is warn them, if you move, if you don't do this, I am going to tase you. That did not happen. And the last thing I'm going to tell you about the taser, y'all, Mr. Crump, I've read, was he right? He was 100% right. It's deployed twice, no more probes. And then some of you are really good in this, I'll give you credit. You know about the stun capability. We believe that the standard operating taser, we believe it's a Taser X7 off the top of our heads, is what we believe. That's what they at least were given the last couple years in a case that I already have. And assuming it's an X7, which we think it is, there would be a stun capability. Translation, where if the taser were touched to somebody's skin and the trigger is pulled, like a gun, it would zap them, but it's a non-incapacitating shock. The probes are incapacitating shock, which are designed to knock you to off your feet onto the ground so they can subdue you. So anybody out there that is reporting, like I've seen, and commenting that if Patrick had, first they're saying that Patrick had it. You can't see that in the video. And if you heard the officer, he didn't say, you have my taser, get your hand off my taser. Well, then what do you see, y'all? You see his right hand come for his gun. That's his right dominant hand. That's where he had the taser. He left the taser on the ground. And if they're going to try to run with that he can shoot somebody because you can actually zap somebody and non-capacitating under the law, that it would be deadly force for a non-deadly force situation, cannot happen. So this is, to respond to your question directly, crystal clear, an inappropriate use of deadly force, especially knowing the officer is on top of our client, he is in control of our client, meaning he's got his knees on the back of Patrick's knees, if you watch. Eerily familiar with another case Mr. Crump was involved with in Minneapolis, I might add. It looked to me like he at one point had an arm around, maybe a chokehold, maybe not. But as you can see, it looks to us that when my client turns his head to the left, his head is being shoved down, which is part of the control. And then the right hand comes to the gun, and he immediately gets shot. So evidence, clear, deadly situation that he used wrong under his own training. I hope I answered your question.
Last couple of questions. That's what we believe from the video, yes.
Well, the video is clear. So in other words, how could he look at the license plate that in Michigan we all have in the rear? How could he know about the alleged problem? Yeah, we don't know what the problem, or if there really was a problem.
Yeah.
We just know what he said on the video. This license plate, he said to Patrick, doesn't belong to this car. And Patrick is like, huh? What are you talking about? So how would he know that when Patrick's coming the other way and there's no license plate that you can see on the back?
So I know one thing that has not really come out yet is
No, we're hearing rumors, but we haven't confirmed that.
But we need to get all the video and watch it beginning to end, when obviously we'll comment. But I know this, you never hear Patrick say anything to this officer in a threatening manner, nor take any action to physically threaten. He was, in essence, pushing back and defending himself. You can see him when the officer has even the taser out, which he shouldn't in that instance, by the way. Patrick was trying to push it away. That's reflexive. That's self-defense. But clearly, we now know there was no true fight between these two people.
Okay, last couple of questions.
You all mentioned that you all haven't received all of the video. How much more video is out there now outside of the document?
We're not aware. We know there was a body cam video that went off inexplicably at some point. Then there was the home surveillance video, and then there was the passenger's cell phone video.
I asked you this in Grand Rapids about the potential language barrier. Can you kind of go into a little bit more detail? Because one of the first questions we heard the officer say is, do we speak English? It seems as though before you completely understand.
Yeah.
You've been around the family. We've heard the interpreter, translating for the family. How, great was his English? Did he really know what was going on from what you?
Well, we're still investigating that matter, so we'll find out and let you know as we find out. I know that police officers are trained to de-escalate situations, that they are trained for people to resist them, and that we see no de-escalation with this police officer. In fact, we see the very opposite. He continues to escalate at every stage, leading to the deadly execution with Patrick being shot in the back of the head.
Mr. Crump, you told us it is eventually going to be released by Fairgrounds Police in context. Yes or no? Do you believe the agency is intentionally misled the public at this point?
We're still investigating. I know Attorney Johnson, Attorney Ayana, and Madeline. We're just looking at everything that they have done and said, because we want to take them at their word that they're going to be transparent, completely transparent. However, our clients, because of the promises we made to them, we have to accept but verify.
Attorney Crump, question via Zoom from Eileen Grunch. What did the family say when they saw the results of the autopsy?
They obviously saw what happened on the video, and then it was confirmed on autopsy, and they are still just in utter disbelief. As they said, my heart was snatched out of my body, is what his father and mother articulated. Governor did meet with the family. I don't know what was said other than that she promised a very thorough investigation to the family. Thank you all.
Jim, hold on.
What's my what?
Are you 95 years old, and what's your secret?
Are you 95 years old, and what's your secret?
What my secret is? My parents. That's my secret, because they must have had good genes for me, and they lived to a good old age. My mother was almost 98 when she died, and my father was 96. So I'm 95, yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
We'll keep you updated. Thank you, Dr. Spitz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spitz.